Good afternoon, everybody. I hope y'all are doing very well in the world. No, today's are crazy times. Just remember, take care of your health, wash your hands, keep your hands away from your face, maintain that social distancing, and wear your mask whenever you're outside. It's still around, and also just make sure to stay on top of your mental health. Go for a walk every once in a while. Enjoy the fresh air safely, of course. Pick up a new book. As such, I will be looking into a book that was given to me and giving my breakdown of that book. It is called Adhaata Asao's Liege, written by Afroz Olam. The basic plot structure of the story, it revolves around a farmer and a poor trader who fell through the mountains in India, landed in a pool, was resuscitated back to health with minimal physical injuries. And it turns out he happens to be the reincarnation of Lord Vishnu, which is the Indian god of preservation. This is a fantasy or a mythology story that takes place in India. As such, there's lots of Indian symbolism depicted throughout the text. Character development is a key aspect in novels specifically. It has the necessary word count to be able to develop and flesh out characters to the point where they seem very believable. Their actions are very similar to what it is that we would look into and expect from characters within our lives. The characters overall, the entire cast, are very two-dimensional and are very static. They have a lot of potential, but they don't really move out of that static. Who they're fleshed out to be from the beginning is exactly who they are throughout the end of the book, and they're not entirely fleshed out. Now, you don't really know who they are aside from their names, what it is that their background was, but you don't really get a sense of personality throughout most of the characters that are introduced. The exception to that is Rabu, the main character. He is the farm boy. He is the trader who fell through the cracks in the mountain and landed in the pool. He is the reincarnation of Vishnu. He does remain static for most of the book. The time where he changes is during a time when the political games are happening, and he is either a fraud, even though he has said that he is not the reincarnation of Vishnu, or he is actually the reincarnation of Vishnu. And the military leader and the religious leader have determined that he has to do this to prove himself, even though he wants absolutely nothing to do with it. You have that reluctant hero vibe going on, and he changes when they put his friends' lives on the line. And so even though he doesn't want to go through this trial, doesn't want to go through this test, he goes forward with the test to save his friends. And when he does that, the reincarnation of Vishnu takes over. His personality changes. He doesn't forget the relationships that he's developed as Rabu, but he very much does become the avatar that the religious leaders have determined him to be. And here we have a forest. Has absolutely nothing to do with dwarfs, but here we are. We're talking about dwarfs. The antagonists in this novel, Adhaata Asao's Liege, are not the stereotypical dwarves that you would expect. If I was to say, look, I met with a dwarf today, you're probably thinking I was out at the bar with, obviously not now, social distancing and all that, but you'd think I probably would have been at a bar, had a couple of beers with this shorter version of a Viking, probably most likely red hair, as an axe strapped to his back, so on and so forth. That's probably what you were expecting when you're hearing of the name dwarf. And that's the common explanation of it. However, that is not the case in this book. The best way to describe it is a humanoid with animal features. And what I immediately thought of are shorter version of Trollocs from The Wheel of Time, if you've read that book. They're basically humanoid creatures that have animalistic characteristics. Not so much as, like a werewolf, it's all one wolf. You would have the nose of a pig. You'll have the ears of a cat and the snout of a dog, so on and so forth. So definitely for like originality, I was kind of, at least for India, that definitely seems to be the case. I'm not 100% sure what the folklore for dwarves are within the native to India, but we will go forth into world development shortly, where we can discuss that into more detail. World building has given us a lot to think about within the fantasy genre. They have made great strides to build up histories that we know nothing of, to build worlds that we have yet to be seen. The exception is low fantasy, urban fantasy such as Harry Potter, or modern fantasy. And what that is, it is a fantasy story in the realm of reality, in which case the world in which we live in is the setting. That is the case here with Adhaata Asao's Liege. It takes place somewhere in the Rocky Mountains of India, and not to be confused with the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. Completely different place. As such, the author does rely heavily upon the reader's knowledge of Indian culture, Indian religion, and Indian geography. The author does not go into heavy detail, except in the beginning of the book, as to what all these things would actually look like. In order for you to see, you do need to do some research to actually see what it is that the author is trying to convey. As such, for a Western European reader, it is going to require that additional research to fully understand and comprehend the style of which the author is trying to convey, with all the imageries in place. That being said, fantasy is usually done in a medievalistic setting. Wheel of Time, kind of like you got the Renaissance, you've got the Lord of the Rings, and the Warhammer books, you have the Canterbury Tales. That's really medieval, that's not really fantasy, but you get the idea. And with that being said, it is refreshing to see kind of like a new look. I just think that the detail could have been a lot better in conveying the actual world so that the reader can actually see what it is that the author is trying to convey without having to take a break and go online to find out what it is that this particular item looks like, and so on and so forth, because that can really pull a Western reader out of the story. If a Western reader is very much in tune with the religious implications and cultures and geography in India, it would pose much less of a problem. And my favorite topic, diction. The choice of words through connotation and denotation. If you do not like hearing about connotation, denotation, and things like that, this will bore you, so please get out. The denotation is the literal meaning of the word. That is precisely the definition that you will find in the dictionary. It doesn't really do anything more than that. It's very specific to that purpose. A connotation is the imagery and emotions that a specific word is going to convey. Such as an example, if you started using room and cage interchangeably, it's going to invoke a different kind of meaning. Whereas like a bedroom can be a very physical, just room, 4 walls, it's got a bed, a couple of windows. If you start referring to a room as a cage, you immediately start invoking the idea that your bedroom is nothing more than a prison. We've spoken this about dwarves when I mentioned a dwarf. If you're European, Western European, or from the Western Hemisphere, United States or Canada, probably Mexico, assuming they have some of the same fairy tales, we'll be thinking of a Viking with red hair. He's got chicken and chicken bones stuck in his beard and mustache while downing away his 8th tankard of mead. I do not drink that much. I barely drink, but mead is delicious. However, getting back on topic, the novel tends to use castle and palace interchangeably. Now, castle is not really something that, as a Western reader, you feel would actually be appropriate for an Indian, or even just like anything beyond Eastern Europe, east of Eastern Europe, actually just wouldn't quite fit. Because when we see the word castle, hear the word castle, we are not thinking of a palace per se. We are really thinking of that large building that's got dungeons underneath. It's made of rock bricks. It's got a moat. It's got a drawbridge. It's got knights guarding it. It's got archers, and probably has a couple of traps here and there. There's a king in there, etc., etc. That is the kind of meaning that you're going to convey when you hear or read castle. If you hear or read palace, you're going to be thinking of something a little bit differently. So when I hear palace, I think of the Anastasia Disney film, when you had basically the ball with Anastasia in there when she's doing her dance before Rasputin does his thing, just creates massive panic. That to me is what's going to convey a meaning of a palace. In terms of the literary achievement and word choice, that really should have been more focused on. It really should have been kept consistent with just the word palace, because to me, that with this specific level of connotations there, it will convey that more appropriately. With that being said, the author does use them interchangeably, possibly with that in mind. And if that is the case, it just didn't really convey it very well, because it didn't really seem to be appropriate for the tense. For the word choice, that was really the only one that kind of stood out to me, and everything that, every time that castle would be mentioned, it would pull me up out of the story. And as a novel, whether it be just a standard novel of over 40,000 words or a more of an epic novel, closer to 100, 150,000 words, word choice matters. And when you're dealing with the word choice, you do want to make sure that you are conveying enough connotation within the words to convey the specific level of imagery that a writer wants their readers to see. And finally, the moment we've all been waiting for, or not if you've already left the room, or clicked home, which would be up the upper left-hand corner. My overall feeling for this does not match what you will find on Amazon. Amazon rates it at a 4.6 on average, most of them being 5, most of them being 4. And again, it's nothing inherently wrong with it. If you are a reader who's just looking for like another fairy tale, this isn't a bad one to go to. It would be very similar to picking up Canterbury Tales or even the Brothers Grimm. It would be a very long fairy tale for the Brothers Grimm. I personally placed it on a 2 because I did not find it to be very enjoyable, because the plot was very predictable. The plot was very linear. It had a predictable ending. It had a very unsatisfying ending, in my opinion, because, again, it was predictable. And for many people, they like that. They're looking for a simple story, and it will serve that kind of purpose for them. But just for me, it was not very satisfying, because you know how the book is going to end, like within the first 4 chapters of the book. So I placed it as a 2 for enjoyability. Well, I definitely think a lot more care could have gone into it. And just furthermore, as to what is coming next, we're looking at a Ballad of Songs and Snakes, Ballad Songs of Birds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is the prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy. I've heard mixed things about that, so be on the lookout for that. More upcoming. You're probably going to be looking at a Silent Voice and a Garden of Words, which is also going to be very, very interesting. And so, again, if you liked everything, don't forget to like my page or subscribe, and we'll see you next time.